And this was not a high-flying game where you're gonna throw the ball all over the lot. Just wasn't shaping out that way. And part of that was the pass rush of both teams, um, which was really good.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Victory Tuesday here on Birds 365 across the JAKIB Sports Network. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mac, John McMullen. Eagles get a big win on the road in Green Bay last night, moved to 7-2 on the year in a very impressive defensive performance. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Tuesday morning, my friend?
Woo! Night games. Somebody's got to give me some energy. But yeah, boy, what a defensive performance, to say the least. Jaelan Phillips, can't say enough about that guy. Maybe give the game ball to Howie Roseman for that one, because everything fell into place defensively. He was a beast. And talking about the fourth down play where Josh Jacobs said the Eagles knew what was coming, and it evidently was Moro Ajomo yelling it out, and he really knew what was coming and basically blew up that play. And about three guys were in the backfield. So preparation with Vic Fangio, smart players, high football IQ. I talk about Moro all the time. Got to Texas at 16, University of Texas at 16. He's a really smart guy. Defense, all good. Offense, not so much, but we talked about that last night. Risk-averse team.
We'll tap back into that conversation.
Yeah, risk-averse team. You're gonna have your ups, you're gonna have your downs.
Yeah, I get it.
What was interesting is that you're so risk-averse the whole game, and then you throw it a 4th and 6. I'll never understand that decision. In that situation. Now, it didn't matter. Obviously, they won the game. There were only a very limited amount of time, but you're giving the Packers an opportunity to get in field goal position. And that was they got a bad field goal kicker. It was a good field goal kicker, but at this age, that really impacted them as well. Because remember, the Eagles weren't comfortable with Jake Elliott, the kick, and that would have been 53, which is very makeable in a better environment for Jake Elliott, but they didn't want to kick that. And the wind, I think, was going that way, so maybe that impacted the Eagles. But there was no way he was making that 60 whatever yarder. And he barely got it off the ground, but it was still a strange decision, because if you push them back with a punt there, I mean, the game's over.
Yeah, I didn't really understand that. And normally, John, there's at least some logic that, like, it didn't really make sense at all for me to go for it there. It almost felt like they were trying to feed AJ there, but I don't know. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. John, I do want to start on the defense. Obviously, man, do they look good? I mean, they have come so far already just this season, and then you add a player like Jaelan Phillips, who we talked about at length on the postgame show. I mean, he really brings everything together on that defense. They dominated the football game. Jordan Love, just really couldn't get anything going. Now, I think, full disclosure, you got to discuss that Green Bay was missing a lot of guys. I think if
they were.
That's a big part of it. But you still got to tip the cap to that defense, John. With the addition of Jaelan Phillips, man, is this defense back, John? It almost feels like they have the chance to be that good. Now, I'm not saying they are yet, but with the addition of Phillips, with the way I think the secondary is going to be able to come together, with the defensive line playing that good, I mean, you saw all the tackles play better on the interior with better presence on the edge. I think Jaelan Phillips played over 50 snaps out there. Nolan Smith in 19 snaps, I think it was, had a sack, a forced fumble. I mean, he was all over, or I don't know if he had a forced fumble. That was the Kobe. But again, he was all over the stat sheet. That defense is really coming together, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, Nolan was limited. Obviously, they didn't put a full plate on him, so it'll get better and better as he gets ramped up. I think from that standpoint, the most interesting. I thought maybe the best player on the field was Quinyon Mitchell. I mean, he had an unbelievable game. So it wasn't just the front, but it started there. It started with Jaelan Phillips. Kobe Dean, I thought, had a tremendous game. So they were dominating at all three levels. I thought it was interesting. Adoree Jackson got the start over Kaylee Ringo. This is one guy who it'll be interesting to talk to Vic this week. We won't do that until because of the short week. It's going to be it's not going to be till Thursday, but it'll be interesting to see his thought process because we're like, well, is it going to be Ringo? Are you going to get Jair Alexander up the feed? Are you going to activate Jacorian Bennett? No, he throws out Adoree Jackson. And, Green Bay, as you mentioned, was up against it, then lost some guys in game. So you got to be careful. And in 5 days, we're going to know because unless St. Brown gets hurt during practice, unless Jameson Williams gets hurt during practice, unless Sam Laporta gets hurt during practice, unless Jahmyr Gibbs gets hurt during practice, yada, 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 they're all going to be there. And you're going to this is the game we wanted to see last year. We're going to get to see it this year. It's in the regular season. We might see it twice ultimately. But this will tell you a lot. But I already know this is a good defense. It's a matter of how good. And they have a chance to be very good now that Jaelan Phillips is in the mix.
Yeah, no doubt. And they suffocated that Green Bay offense last night all the way to the end, really, with in the game. Again, I feel like the only reason the Packers had a shot last night at the end there was because of that Sirianni play. I didn't really understand why he did that. John, they were missing, though, a lot of people. How much kind of credence do you put on that? I mean, I know the defense dominated, but this is a team that has had offensive flukes, John, in terms of, I think they had 7 or 10 points when they lost to the Browns. They had 13 points when they lost the other game. So they've had a problem with the offense really sputtering, and they were missing a lot of guys. Man, Romeo Doubs went out in that game. No Jaden Reed. No Matthew Golden, obviously no Tucker Kraft, all that stuff. John, how much kind of stock do you put in that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big break from that standpoint. But again, it's not the Eagles' fault that guys get hurt on other teams. But they had this excessive run of being more healthy than the opponent, and that kind of happened again. But that's not their fault. You just play who's out there. And once it boiled down, it essentially boiled down to Christian Watkins, Dontavian Wicks, and Luke Musgrave instead of what you're typically going to see. And if you want to go all the way back to, having Dobbs and Reed and Kraft, it would have been different, but they're not available. That's not the Eagles' fault. So they played who they played. They played who was on the field, and they dominated who was on the field. And that's what you're supposed to do. Take advantage of those situations. And I think they took advantage of those situations, and I'm not going to mark them down because of that. I mean, I don't think if Dobbs didn't come out, I don't think it was going to change much. Now, if Kraft was there, that would have been much more difficult, but it's the breaks of this game. That's what it's about. That's why they called it a war of attrition. I mean, Detroit last year, we were all looking forward to that game, and they had all the injuries on defense, and life's not fair.
No, it's not. No, it's not, Johnny Mac. No, the Eagles, great. I mean, look, it was an interesting game though. 10-7. It was 0-0 at halftime. The Eagles, I think, scored or got a field goal. On the first drive of the second half. But outside of that, really not much offense in the game at all, John. It was kind of an old school defensive performance, but I really thought the offenses were both really bad in the game, and enough to the point where I'm concerned about the Eagles' offense. But I understand. We had the debate. We went back and forth about it on the postgame show. What do you kind of make of an offensive performance like that, where you only put up 10 points? You do get a win. You're at Lambeau on the road, Monday Night Football. I understand the circumstance, and you're happy to walk out of there with the win. But it's hard to feel inspired by this offense after a performance like that. And hey, maybe it's a week-to-week league, and they're not this next week. But I feel like I've seen a lot of inconsistent offense.
Well, it's definitely a week-to-week league. I mean, that is evidenced every week if you pay attention to the other teams. It's, everybody has bad games. You look at Buffalo this week. You saw they haven't lost to Miami in years, and they played one of their worst games in years in losing, and Josh Allen looked terrible. It happens to everybody in this league. So, number one, yes, it's a week-to-week league. Number two, and that's what we get. Look, I've seen this before. I've seen this movie before. I'm not surprised when this offense struggles. Um, and the question is why? And to me, when I look at it from a fan base perspective, look, they're invested in the players. They don't want to blame the players, period. End of sentence. They want to blame. It's easy to blame the coaches. When they're successful, 38-20 against the Giants, 28-22 against the Vikings. It's players first. When they're unsuccessful, offensively, 10-7, 10 points against the Packers, it's always players first. Doesn't change from week to week. It's not to say that the coaching staff isn't important. It's very important. I would argue preparation and that part of it's more important, but they're always a big part of it, but it's always players first. You can't have it both ways. Well, anybody can do anything they want, but the quarterback didn't play well, and you're trying to get to the finish line. But one thing I said about halftime, and I think I hit the nail on the head, he's going to make 2 or 3 plays, and Jordan Love's not, because both quarterbacks were playing poorly. And I say this all the time with most quarterbacks, if they're playing poorly in a given day, I compare it to starting pitchers. If they don't have their best stuff, and they're going to have a bad day. And then there's the occasional starting pitcher. My example is Roger Clemens in his prime. If he didn't have his best stuff, he was going to grind, and he was going to grind, and he was going to grind, and he was going to get you to the finish line more often than not. That's my comparison with Jalen Hurts. He's the guy who's going to forget all the bad shit and make plays. And really, it was 2 plays. It was extending and finding Saquon wide open on a little outlet pass, followed by the dagger to Devontae Smith. That's it. 2 plays. I believe that was 77 of his 182 yards passing. 2 plays. And that essentially won the game because of the personality of the game. And that's the unique, and I always use that word to describe Jalen Hurts. And that's big. So for people that say, well, you're shitting on the quarterback, you shit on the quarterback, you shit on the quarterback. No, you want to defend the quarterback at all costs. He didn't play well. That's easy to see. It should be to any objective observer, either to Jordan Love. He didn't play well. It's easy to see.
He was terrible too. I didn't think it was good performance from either quarterback. But John, we talked about the whole, the 3rd and long thing where they do these inside zones. And we kind of went back and forth on it last night. And I was agitated at the way they do that. And maybe I should paint it with more of a broad brush than an isolated brush of like a deep ball to AJ. But it just feels to me like there's got to be a little bit more there when you have the type of firepower it feels like they have on the offensive side of the ball. I understand you're telling me it's a risk-averse offense. They're not going to push the ball down the field in those circumstances. They want to protect the football. So I guess my question to you today would be, do you feel like that risk-averse approach could cost them at some point if you are up against a different style of opponent, a different style of team, somebody that's maybe moving the ball a little bit better, or your defense isn't having as dominant of a night? That would be my thing on it, because when you watch that offense last night, I just don't think that's the type of offense that this team can play if they have the aspirations that I'm sure they have to kind of go the distance.
Well, I think there's 2 things to that. You're probably, and you're going to see it on Sunday night. You're probably going to have to play a different style of game to beat Detroit, and they will. I don't know if they're going to win, but they certainly, wouldn't surprise me at all if they win. Doesn't surprise me when they beat anybody. They're going to play a different style of game. One thing I should have mentioned on the post-game show, which I didn't, and I should have, because I was hyper focused on, like, I literally can't believe anybody who's watching the NFL more than 10 minutes doesn't understand that teams will often run draw plays on 3rd and 12, because it's not it's not a positive situation you put yourself in as an offense. Now, there are teams like, the greatest show on turf Rams and the Lions, who are going to always press it for the most part, 90% of the time, who are really, truly explosive offenses. But a lot of teams are going to, hey, let's play field position. Let's do this, because we don't have the ability to make up for some of the negativity that got us into this 3rd and long situation. So, number one, draw plays on 3rd and long are not rare in the NFL at all. The part I didn't bring up was, remember who the Eagles were game planning for. And you saw it in the first half. I thought it in the second half. People are going to look at the stat sheet and say, well, Micah didn't get home. Well, if you watch the first half of that game, Micah didn't get home because Jalen Hurts didn't let him get home. He was there, but there were 2 or 3 plays where Jalen just got out of it, and they didn't have the supplemental rush, whereas as Micah flushed him, nobody else was there to make the play. So the Eagles did a good job overall from that protection standpoint. But remember, if they're 3rd and 12, he's pinning his ears back. And I don't know how many times I have to tell people, and they have a ton of fucking respect for that player. And they don't want to be in 3rd and 12 against Micah Parsons. They don't want to be in 3rd and 12. So it is going to be different than the New York Giants, even though they have a good pass rush. Everybody but Myles Garrett, it's going to be different, because those are the 2 guys I would say they have the most respect for. So they're game planning for Micah Parsons, and they don't want to be in that situation. Now, again, that's something I should have mentioned. And it should be obvious, considering what they offered to get, but to get them 2 first-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, a 5th-round pick, and players. They got a lot of respect for that freaking guy.
Yeah.
So that's part of it as well, that the idea was, A, don't get in that situation.
Is there any gray area though there, John? Like, I understand what you're saying. All right, this is their approach. They're going to be risk averse, especially in a game like that. Is there no gray area of, like, all right, you can still have a little bit of a risk averse approach while trying to pick up more than a couple yards there? Should we take a shot to the out of bounds for Devontae or AJ? Is there anything, again, paint it with a more broad brush than I did last night, of a deep ball to AJ? I understand you're not going to do that every play, but it feels like when you have this many playmakers, when you have Dallas Goedert, there's a way to be risk averse and not put the ball in harm's way while still trying to give yourself an opportunity to move the football in those situations.
Well, you could always you could always do what they did on 4th and 6. That's not a risky play at all, and just run a go ball. And they've had a ton of success with that in big situations. And that's
I guess if the worst case scenario happens, it's almost like an arm punt.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not very risky. Again, that's not. And again, I think personality of the game plays into it. You're in that sort of tough, grinded out field position game at those points, and you're playing to the personality of the game as well. So if you're down 14-3 against the Lions, yeah, maybe you do it. I think that the personality of the game changes it as well. But yeah, I mean, they've done it many times in the past, and generally it's in a more high flying environment. That the best thing, I mean, again, people have watched the NFL, and Jim Schwartz was the one who told me it, and he's not the first to say it. Games have personalities. It's real. You saw it last night. It's
Absolutely
real. And this was not a high flying game where you're going to throw the ball all over the lot. Just wasn't shaping out that way. And part of that was the pass rush of both teams, which was really good, and really effective. And that's the way it shook out. But in general, so then you have the personality of the game claim with the Eagles' identity is risk averse. And I'm the first one to say, is it too risk averse? Yes. I don't think it's fair. I've said that pretty consistently. I don't think it's fair to the quarterback. But now I think they've harmed the quarterback with that mentality. I think that tightrope has been crossed. I think they've harmed. Like you brought up 2022, which I get. He's not the same player, dude.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And they
the only reason I brought that up is because I felt like even if he's not the same player, that was an example of coaching accentuating his talents at that time. So I just feel like it can be better a lot of the times. I understand where you're coming from, but the other part of it that is tough. It's like when we think about how good the defense is, we go right to Vic Fangio. You know what I mean? Like we go right to Vic. When we look at the offense and
go to the players.
They're inept. First. They're largely inept for many portions of games, and I don't know. We're 9 games deep. How many halves of football has the offense?
Here's where you are to your point about where the Eagles' assets are at, which you mentioned last night, which is absolutely correct. And we're now a year and a half where the defense has been better than the offense. And this year, the defense lost 5-6 consecutive significant contributors, and they're still better than the offense. So, Vic deserves credit, but the players deserve credit more. Like I said, first, before I mentioned Vic, who's great, and I think he's the best defensive mind in football, I mentioned Jaelan Phillips. I mentioned Quinyon Mitchell. I mentioned Nakobe Dean and even Adoree Jackson. Forget about the star players. It's still the players first. I mean, Vic's not out there.
Yeah, no. I mean, but you understand how like the perception there is more.
That's about. Again, fans in general do not want to blame the players they're invested in when things go poorly. Obviously, they didn't go poorly on defense. It's easy to prop up the players on defense today because things went very well. Offensively, things went very poorly. So you're going to most fans ship the blame to the coaching staff because they're so invested in players, which is natural. It happens in every city.
You understand, though, how that could at least look or sound like a contradiction by you in terms of Vic gets a lot of credit for the defense and offense struggles, and it's and you're. I mean, I don't want to.
The defense. It hasn't changed at all because I say players first. Before I mentioned Vic, I mentioned Phillips and Mitchell and Dean and et cetera, and even Adoree Jackson. I think
Vic just brings out that next level. You know what I mean? Like he gets them to that. I mean, look, the players are great.
Well, last night he did,
coordinator do what he's doing with them? I don't think so, and I think that's fine to say and fair to say. That's where when I look at the offense, I don't see that type of outcome or that type of production from a unit that I believe should be capable of a lot more than they've done this year. I do think Patullo deserves some blame.
Well, I think you can blame. I think there's plenty of blame to go around to the coaching staff, but I think it's misplaced. I think if you want to blame the coaching staff, start with that risk-averse nature. Like it is impacting the quarterback, and it is impacting the receivers who are now frustrated with the quarterback. Because the quarterback
is that more Nick than Kevin?
Yeah, well, it certainly, it's.
I mean, because they've been doing that since before.
Yeah, first of all, it's been Nick's offense since day one, since he got here. It was Nick's offense when Shane was doing it, Brian was doing it, Kellen was doing it. Little bit more of a morphing with Kellen, but still at the end, more at the beginning than the end, because it morphed into Nick's offense more than Kellen's. And we're back to Nick again. So, it's always Nick first, and he'll take, credit, blame, whatever you want to do on a given week, usually blame. And he'll say he's responsible, and he is responsible. But the over, which by the way works. I mean, they turned it over with the fumble, and if they didn't fumble, by the way, they would have won that game probably pretty easily. That kind of
They did
shifted
start
things.
fast on offense.
Yeah. But again, no interceptions. He's at Jalen's at 1 interception through 9 games. I mean, it's working. So that's the part what they lean on. But I do think they've impacted the player, and I think they've impacted more. So if you want to blame the coaching staff, and I'm, blame them all you want, I just think it's misplaced. That's where I would start, and that's where I blame them. I think they've gotten too risk averse, and it's impacting the quarterback, and it's impacting the receivers' frustration with the quarterback, and they don't have the crutch of the running game to lean on this year, so it looks even uglier. Last year,
the running game is hard. It's harder to get that run game going when I guess you could say the threat of the offense pushing the ball down the field is not as prominent, for large periods of time this year.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty, you think about, people in Green Bay this morning are criticizing how much Packers run inside zone when they go tempo and try to get you fast. And that's what Moro Joma kind of yelled out on the Josh JAKIB Sport down play, and the Eagles met him 4 yards in the backfield. So people there are criticizing Matt LaFleur for that. People here are going to criticize the inability to get the passing game going because they have the great receivers and the great tight end, and people think they have a top 5 quarterback. So why can't they throw the ball? They've created this with their risk averse philosophy. Not that, again, they would ever be a high volume passing offense, because I don't think they have that style of quarterback, but they have impacted him, and he's not the same player he was in 2022 when he put up better numbers. And a lot of that is tied. There's a reaction to every action in life. Everything, everywhere, everything. And for all the greatness of Saquon Barkley last year, it impacted the passing game because there was less urgency to get it going because they didn't need it.
Right.
And now they need it. And Jaelan has said this himself last year at times when they struggled. It's like, you got to be careful if you don't use something. It might not be there when you need it. And last year it was there when you needed it against Washington and against mainly Kansas City in the Super Bowl. But even that was more defense than, if you really look at it, it wasn't that even outrageous from a passing perspective in the NFC Championship game, despite all the points.
Yeah, it wasn't.
And the Super Bowl, which the game was over early because of the defensive dominance. And again, if you look at the first 2 playoff games against Green Bay and against the Rams, the passing game was bad, downright bad. So my point is, this is not new, but Saquon was like a big giant eraser, a brand new eraser on the back end of your pencil. He erased everything last year. This year he's not doing that, and it looks worse. But to the Eagles' credit, they're 7-2 and number 1 seed in the NFC. Remember, they weren't even the number 1 seed last year. They're in a position. They have the inside track. If they beat Detroit, man.
Objectively, they completely have the inside track with all the wins they've piled up in the NFC.
Yeah, you beat the Rams. You beat Tampa. You beat Green Bay. So you have the inside track on all those teams. You can get it against Detroit. So the one team out there is Seattle.
Seattle, right.
But they have the inside track to get the number 1 seed, and they didn't even have, as good as they were last year, they didn't even have the number 1 seed.
Yeah. John, let's go to the defensive side of the ball real quick. What is the What is the potential, man, of this defense? I mean, I know they're not ranked, I don't think top 5 or anything right now, but you can see how they've continued to improve each week. And it's a week-to-week league. You always say that. There's not a lot of transitive properties, but I have seen some transitive nature from this defense week to week where they look like they're building each week. Then they add a couple players. John, it almost feels like they have depth at edge rusher. They have a lot of guys at edge rusher.
Yeah.
So much so that guys are going to have to work their ass off just to get in the rotation now. It's amazing how things can change so quickly. What is the upside, John, of this defense who really is gelling at this point of the year and looked their best last night in a game versus, a team that is a good team, that is a good offense?
Yeah, I can't say enough to the point that I would have gave Howie a game ball for making that trade. I can't say enough about Jaelan Phillips and how everything kind of fit into place with him on the field. And he ended up playing 53 of 68 snaps. So he was out there a long time.
He was the most of any edge rusher, right? For a snap count.
And Nolan only had 19 as he's working his way back in the ramp up here. That's only going to increase, and Jalix played 43. So that'll probably flip as he gets healthier, and conditioning part of it goes in. So they're only going to get better and better. And to me, the most interesting part is leaning on Nakobe and Adoree more than Jihad and a younger player, whether it was Keeley or you activated Jacorian Bennett, which they did not do. And I'm at the point where I'm thinking, and I'll get to talk to Vic on Thursday. Like, he just wants veteran guys out there because he's got enough around the veteran guys. Yeah. So he wants guys out there not making mistakes. And the one exception would be Makuba. Now, Campbell's still going to play. He played 34 snaps.
Yeah, he still got some snaps.
So they're very cognizant.
On Campbell, and he doesn't really look, ready.
No, he doesn't. He's not an edge rusher, and they don't need him on the edge.
He did get snapped there, though, didn't he?
Yeah, well, I saw him there a couple times.
Yeah,
I
me
can see
too.
the numbers aren't out yet from PFF. I'll have to see, but I did see him there a couple times, and I was surprised by it because they didn't need it. And the one big component, which I don't understand because he's played well, Josh Uche didn't get one defensive snap. So Brandon Graham got 10 and Josh got 0. Like, wow. He was only on special teams. That, it's hard to argue with the performance, but that was strange to me. But, Bick is Bick, and just because we think somebody's playing well, like he's looking at different things than we're looking at, and he's looking at more of the consistent play to play. Is this guy doing what I ask him to do?
And speaking of Jaelan Phillips, I thought he checked all those damn boxes last night. I mean, John, were you surprised by his ability to play the run? I mean, he was, we talked about when he got traded, and we kind of went back and forth on that. Boy, he looked amazing against the run yesterday. Felt like he was in the right position at the right time, and he was good against the run.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the fourth down play, that's a perfect example. Because he crashed it. Now, again, Morrow deserves a lot of credit. He's alerting everybody to what's coming, and then he's able to crash and meet him. And Reed was there as well. And meet him in the backfield, but 4 yards in the backfield. That play never even got started. So, it's good team defense. He's a physical freak. That's why he was the 18th, 19th pick in the draft, whatever he was. He's 6'6", he's 260. Athletically, he's got everything you need to do everything. But yeah, his history is more pass rush than run support. But that doesn't mean, like I said, everybody thinks Jalix Hunt, developmental pass rusher. And all of a sudden, Vic shows up and says, you know what? He's pretty good at run support more than the pass rush at this stage early in his career. these guys are physically gifted. So it's sort of like Dallas Goedert on the offensive side. Like when he was in college at a lower level, South Dakota State, like he never blocked because he was the best receiver they had. And all of a sudden he shows up and they're like, well, we need you to block, and you're 260 and you're big and you're physical. And he just embraces it and he becomes a good blocker. So anytime you have the physical gifts of a Jaelan Phillips, you can do anything. But to date, obviously, he's been more of a pass rusher than a run support player. And that's what the Eagles want, by the way. I mean, they want everything, but they really needed an impact pass rusher, and they got an impact pass rusher.
Yeah, no doubt about it. John, next thing here is something we've gone back and forth on is Nakobe Dean, Jihad Camp. Now, you just mentioned Jihad got a lot of snaps, but holy crap, man, Nakobe Dean still looks like he's really playing good football, man. I mean, he looks like a guy that you just do not want to take off the field at this point with how good he's played out there. Now, I know they're splitting snaps a little bit. Jihad did rotate in there at linebacker, but boy, Nakobe Dean did not lose anything from that injury, which was a concern because that was a big injury. What was your thoughts on Nakobe Dean and the way he's played?
Well, the rehab, because that injury has a storied history and not a good one in the NFL, players who have that injury. So number one, the fact that he's gotten back to this level from a physical standpoint is pretty amazing. And there's been a lot of medical advances as far as surgeries and way they do things. And maybe this is no longer a death sentence. It used to be a death sentence, this injury for NFL players. And maybe that's changing. Then that's a good thing for the entire league, not just Nakobe. But obviously, he's worked tirelessly. He's had a lot of injuries. One of the silver lining, I brought this up when he had his Lisfranc injury. Like he couldn't do anything for so long with his lower body when he had that injury. He was on a rollabout, then he was on in a crutches, then he was in a boot for like 8-9 months. He couldn't do a lot with his lower body. And he comes back and he shows up and he's just huge in his upper body. He just used all that time to get bigger and stronger. And he's a completely different guy from that standpoint. And that's continued again with this injury. And he's so physical. Like when he first got here, that was one of the knocks on Nakobe Dean. He wasn't that big. And he was going to get overwhelmed. Now he's short, but he's this big, stocky, physical guy who is just setting the tone in run support. And he's always had the football IQ, the football intelligence. He's rarely do you see a false step from Nakobe Dean. And Vic loves him. And he loved him last year, and he loves him this year, and he's going to play. It's a difficult conversation, and I asked around last week and got it pretty concrete that Jihad is going to play because they value him so much. But boy, I think as the stakes get higher and higher and higher, Vic is not going to not want Nakobe Dean on the field.
I'm with you, man. Nakobe's playing impressive. So much to the point where I think they might be giving Nakobe Dean an extension. I understand health is a big thing with Nakobe. We will see how he holds up, but really looks good so far in his return to the field. And Jihad Campbell still looks good. He had that big pass interference that set up the Green Bay touchdown. One of those things where you pointed it out last night. Really didn't have to take that pass interference. Kind of a young player there. Probably never got to turn around. And that's something I think he'll learn and build on. But overall, Nakobe Dean was excellent last night. And Jihad Campbell still getting some snaps. Josh Uche was the odd man out with 0 snaps last night, as John pointed out. I want to thank everybody for being here today. Everybody, it's a Victory Tuesday here on Birds 365. You don't get to say that often. A Monday night game. They got the Lions coming up in week 11, Sunday night football in Philadelphia. That's another high-flying offense. They put up 44 last week with Dan Campbell calling plays. I don't know. John, does that make that harder real quick? I mean, we've got plenty to talk about still with the Packer game, but like you have a flipping play caller. Does that almost maybe mess up your preparation for a game like that where there's only now one game of seeing how they've called plays with Campbell? I don't know if they'll stick with that, but
Well, I think they're going to stick with it after last week. People forget when Dan first got there, he called the plays, very similar to Nick Sirianni here. They didn't have a ton of success, but they were a bad team at the time. And he gave it up, and obviously Ben Johnson took off.